First of all, I do know, of course, Giovanni is a first name. Giovanni means John. In Italian, it means John. And my father's family, we do know this, comes from Albany, Georgia. Albany, Alabama. My mother's family comes from Albany. Wake up, Nikki. There's my coffee. Wake up. And Gus's family comes from Mobile, Alabama, which was a port, as you know, well, the port. And we know that people came through, sailors came through. And with Giovanni being a first name, we have to assume, actually, that a sailor named Giovanni had a relationship with my grandmother, who was Mattie Jones. And so all she knew about him would have been Giovanni. And so she named my father, Gus, she named Gus Giovanni. You know, it's like, oh, this is Giovanni's. I have an uncle who is Atkinson, and Bill is gone too. His daughter lives in Florida, but Uncle Bill is Atkinson. So I don't know where Atkinson. Now they may have done something, but I know that Giovanni is John,
Okay.
and so that's where they came from.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And what brought you to Blacksburg to here at Virginia Tech?
I was recruited, and by then my father had died, and I was living with my mother. I have a poem in the new book. The new book is called A Good Cry, and that's because, you know, that's what I'm doing with my family, looking at it the way I look at it. But Gus, we called him Gus. Gus died, and I have a poem that says I married my mother, and pretty much I did. You know, Mommy and I lived together for almost 30 years, and it was, if I do say so myself, it was a very good marriage. We got along very well. And I had a letter from Virginia Fowler. You've been in contact with Jenny. And I had a letter saying, you know, would you consider coming to Virginia Tech? And, you know, if you're married, so I went up, my den was downstairs, and I went upstairs and I said to Mom, we have a letter from Virginia Tech. You know, do you think it's time for me to take a job? Because this was the first job. This is the first job I've ever had.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And I was laughing with Dr. Sands. I know one day I'm going to come in here, it's going to be a little pink slip saying, you know, dear Dr. Giovanni, don't you want to go home? But I've enjoyed being here at Tech. It's like a home to me. And so I came for a year, and Mommy came to visit back and forth to see what she thought about Virginia, because she is actually a Georgian. She's from Albany, you know. Gus is an Alabaman, so if we had gone either of those ways, we lived in Cincinnati, where they both had a job, but she was retired. So if we had gone either of those ways, it would have gone differently. And I didn't. If you look in the back of you see I have Albany there. And look, I mean, you know, Jesse Norman came from Albany. James Brown came from Albany. I mean, a lot of great people. But we didn't have, and there's a building in Albany, it's called the Watson Building. And we didn't, that's her family. But we didn't have any particular reason, so we're coming back and forth. And she's comfortable, and she found a church, St. Paul's, AME. And, you know, Mommy is one of those people. And I really think that one of the things that the young people are missing, a big hole in their life, is the church. And they think it's about religion, which I'm a fan of Jesus, so I don't have a problem with that, to be clear or to be honest. But the church did so much more. And one of the things they did, and I've been working with some kids, is that the church, you know, like once a month had something that you had to stand up and say something. You had to recite a prayer, a song. You had to do something. It was Mother's Day, Father's Day, somebody. It was always something. And the kids always had to get up and say something about it, or sing something, or we had to do something, which meant that we got used to, my generation. Nobody ever said, how come you all were so used to speaking in public? And one of the reasons we is that we had been in church. We grew up speaking in public. So if you look at whether it's Martin, who would be a great speaker, and his father's going to be a preacher, or whether it's people like me, you grew up in the church. And I think that it's a great loss. I really do. I think that the kids today, because kids today don't speak well, as you know,
Right.
and they don't. And I'm not against them, but just don't. And they don't organize. Their minds don't go click click click. They don't think as we did. So just, oh, this is a bad thing. How do we get rid of it? Well, let's march on the bridge. That came from, oh, we understand you this is how you do things. And the kids today don't go click click click. So this is something that, well, maybe they probably won't learn. Their children will probably learn it. I learned a long time ago, don't try to explain my poetry, because if I do, I end up fighting with myself. Because I'll say, oh, I think I did this, and then somebody says, oh, I thought you did that. And you'll get into, but what I like to do is every day, whatever it is you're bringing to, right now, I just turned it on. I'm not good with computers, so you see the big computer, I don't understand at all. I really don't. I think I dislike it. But I have understood the little one. And so I have a little, what do you call it, the little thingy?
The drive.
And whatever I'm doing, I put it on that. I do know how to do it. And then you click, and then it's on that. And then I take it down to my secretary, and she prints it out. I know that's terrible. And when I retire, I'm going to take computer lessons.
Okay.
Yeah. But I like Gemini because I'm Gemini. I am a Gemini. I'm June 7th. And so, and we've got, Prince is there. He's a June 7th, Tupac. So it's a lot of, Gwendolyn Brooks was a June 7th. And in the paper, the normal paper, I don't know if you're into it, but what I read in the paper now, of course, is just the comics. But I start with the birthdays and with what kind of day it is. Today I have a 4-star day, and I have other friends who have a 5-star day. So I'm always looking at things like that. And I am a Gemini, so Geminis are going to be these two. Well, they're Gemini, the twins, and so they're going to be looking at who am I and how do I respond to myself. But I try not to, and I say that to my students. I think the best thing you can do as a writer is try not to ask yourself, why did you do something? Because then you'll try to justify it. And then when you try to do that, then you'll make sure that you don't, what is going to now be called, make a mistake. And you have to make a mistake. If you're going to be a writer, you have to make a mistake. Because if you don't grow from, there's an article in, I don't have it here with me, I think it's this month's Atlantic magazine, and they have a photo of me, which I had to laugh. And my hair, I don't think I have anything that, my hair is out, oh my God, I had that. And they were, my secretary, they were teasing me, and it's, oh, look at your hair. And I said, yeah, I was 28 years old. And, that's what you did when you were 28. You had that kind of hair. I wouldn't dream of letting my hair grow out that long. I do have had plaits, if I, braids, if I was in the mood for that. But I'm pretty much, if I'm not careful, I'm going to shave it down to where you are.
Really?
Yeah, because one, I like it, and two, I have had breast cancer, and people who've been diagnosed with various cancers, you have various ways of treating it. And one of the ways, the chemo and the radiation will take your hair out. And I think that as I have a tattoo mourning Tupac, I think that it might be a good idea to shave my head to let the women who have breast cancer know that we're all in this together.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh gosh, first of all, I had really good teachers. And segregation was a bad idea. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was a good idea. But one of the things that segregation did for my generation is that we had incredibly bright black people because they couldn't get jobs anyplace else. So our teachers, I mentioned Alfreda Delaney or Madame Stokes, our teachers went to Harvard. And not that that's a great, I'm beginning to think less and less of Harvard, but they went to Harvard or Yale or Princeton, and they studied hard and they worked really hard. So what they brought back to high school, if you start to look at, look who taught us in high school, let alone, and when I went to Fisk, I was at Fisk University. I am a Fisk University graduate. My one of my English teachers was Robert Hayden, who has a poem. I mean, he's one of the greatest poets in the world. You've got Bob Hayden. You've got Arno von Tomp, who was a good friend. I knew Mr. von Tomp. I didn't know Mr. Langston Hughes. I didn't know Mr. Hughes. But you had Mr. Hughes. Look at the people we had around us. So, but when we look at the people we were fortunate enough to be taught with, as I say, I can't sit here and say to you, "Oh golly, I wish we had segregation again." But look at what we had. Look at what we had, and it was an amazing thing. We had it because they couldn't go anyplace else, but we were very fortunate to have them. I don't know another way to put that. We had incredible teachers who were saying to us, "You can make a difference. You can make a difference," and we've made a difference. And so now we have to look at the next generation. I don't know what the next generation is going to do. I really don't. I like the next generation, and I'm a big fan. I think it's no. I have that at home too right now. Black Lives Matter. I'm a big fan of Black Lives Matter. I think they're great. They're great kids, but they are really our grandchildren. Our children have not taken sort of well, they took steps, but the children living in the non-segregated world had a lot of different things to deal with. We lived in the segregated world, so we could fight that. They have something else to deal with, but their children and their younger brothers and sisters are better organized, and you can see that. You can see that with the gun. You can see,
Right.
but you can also see that the crazy white people, and I say crazy because I don't mean mental illness, but I mean evil. You can also see that the white people are fighting it, because every time you turn around, they're shooting somebody, they're running across them, they're doing something. They're fighting. They're fighting a war, and it's really time that somebody stop them.
Right.
Yeah, but thank God, Starbucks. I was laughing about that because I'm drinking the Starbucks. Starbucks got on top of it, and I was very happy about Starbucks. I was speaking in Cincinnati, in Columbus, and I said, I was really cheering for Starbucks because every morning I go and get my Starbucks, and if Starbucks hadn't done the right things, I'd have to boycott. One has to do that, and that would be so sad for me to have to. It's like, oh, please, Starbucks, do the right thing. And so they fired her, as well they should. Now, the day that they're having Memorial Day, they're having a half a day off. So this is not going to cost Starbucks a whole lot, because how many people on Memorial Day are going to come, in the afternoon and get coffee? They're going to get coffee in the morning, so we all know that. So we're not going to fool ourselves that Starbucks is, like they lost $1 billion. They didn't. But firing her was incredibly important because it made a statement to all of the rest of the managers that you will lose your job and you will never be hired by Starbucks again. And not only that, but you will not be hired by anybody. You won't be hired by Kmart. You're finished in this whole area. You're finished. That you go work for NRA or something, because evil is not going to work. And so I was very happy for Starbucks, and I was very proud that they did the right thing. So I just don't read the obits. It makes me sad, but I do want to know, and I love it when I see so and so is 92. It's like, yes, because I'm 74, and I like to know that people get to be 92 and 94. And I was sorry, frankly speaking, that Barb Bush died. I wasn't sorry she died, because if you're born, you're gonna die. And she was, what, 92, 94, something like that. And I thought, well, good for Barb, because I like to see that people have lived that long. And I think that, I didn't know Miss Bush, of course, but I think she's a smart woman. I think somebody else said that she was the political law. She was the one political head of the family. And I think that it's true, because what I remember about Barbara Bush, it's just, as Barbara Bush, if you said, what do you remember? Because as I said, I didn't know her. what I remembered about Barbara Bush was holding a black child who had AIDS in her lap. And I thought that that was incredible. I thought, whatever is going on with the Bush family, they're going to get a vote from me. Because if she can hold that child, she's making a statement to, because everybody was like, oh my goodness, AIDS is so terrible. And Ms. Bush was just sitting there saying, I think that it's okay. I'm going to hold this child, because if we had flipped that and the mother was black and the baby was white, she would have been expected to do that. And Barbara Bush understood. No, this is our child, whoever it was, and we're going to hold her. And I said, yeah, let me slide let me slide whatever my one vote, because I appreciated that was a bold thing, and she made a statement, and I thought, yeah, we did what we were supposed to do. So what we have to say now to this generation is going to be very different, because they're the ones running things. And I remember it was laughing. I was in Chicago. I got to go to Chicago in the morning, but I remember being in Chicago, and I'm a big fan of Neiman Marcus. I'm an old woman. I love Neiman. And I go into Neiman so I can see if I can find a pair of pants or, something. And just as I was going down Michigan Avenue, all of a sudden, coming from the south side, they're picketing, of course, Neiman's, which I didn't know Neiman's had done something. I'm not from Chicago. And I saw, and it said, Black Lives Matter, and they're picketing. And I thought, oh, I don't get to go to Neiman's, because you can't go to Neiman's. But none of the kids knew me. So as it goes around, I just fell in the line and just walked with them. So, yeah, because they didn't need me to speak to them or anything like that. They didn't know. I mean, nobody knew me from. Nobody said, oh, Nikki's there. It wasn't. But you're a part of a group, and you have to understand that you're not leading the group. You're just falling in line now. You're doing where the kids are. You're doing what they're showing you.
Right.
And I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I really do. I really do. I was sorry. Well, I'm sure Neiman was more sorry than I was, because I saved money and they lost. These things happen.
Yeah.
They really do.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, when you're creating and when you're writing, what does that space look like for you? Do you write here? Do you write at home?
No, I write at home for the most part. Sometimes I have to put some things together, to be, or I'll start a line. I have a line that I've been carrying now for a couple of months, and I just haven't had time to sit down. And I was saying to my group, I was in Columbus the other day talking to a group of people actually my age, and my problem is I don't think it's a poem. I think it's a song, except that I don't know music. So my job is I'm a blues person, and so what I get to do when I get to finish it is to put it down, and somebody else, somebody who does blues, will come up and realize, oh, it needs C flat or whatever it is that it needs. But I haven't had time to deal with that, and school will be out in I think 2 weeks, and I enjoy school, and that's the truth. But I'll be glad to have just time, because there are things that you want to write. I write at home, and so they're just things that you want to put together, and you just haven't had your grading papers. It's the end of the school year. You got to do and so it's like, well, okay. And I do jot notes, and I've gotten to a point now that I won't even go to bed without a piece of paper, because I wake up. I'm like a lot of people. You wake up in the middle of the night and you've got this line, and if you say I'll write it in the morning, you won't, because you'll forget what it is.
Right.
And so I keep a piece of paper and a pen, and I'll write it. I'll just jot it down. Sometimes it's something, and sometimes it's not. But mostly it's like, oh, that's a nice line. What am I going to do with it? So I've got not a lot, but a bit of a pile going right now. So I'm glad to see summer coming, because I don't really have anything to do with summer. I'll be off a book tour. I'm tired, frankly speaking, of everybody acting like the black community is, nothing but drugs and poverty and you know, there are stories, which is what I love about what Kwame is doing, because he's writing what he grew up in. He grew up in a different community, and everybody loved. I'm so sorry he turned out to be so terrible. The Cosby Family. Everybody loved the Cosby Family, and it's not that white people did or didn't love the Cosby Family. It's that we loved the Cosby Family. We grew up in neighborhoods like the Cosby, and they weren't rich, though they were richer than we were. But they had a yard. There were things that they did. They talked to each other, you know, and that kind of story needs to be on television. You know, I've gotten to a point that, well, I don't look at the news much unless there's something interesting like what happened in Nashville. You know, oh, I need to follow through to see if that guy's going to be here in Virginia, because I teach at a school where 32 people were murdered. So we're always being aware that tragedies can happen. I said to my students, you know, Donald Trump's a fool. And I said to my students, you know, when he said, well, he thinks that the teachers should have guns, they should be armed. So I said to my students, and I'm in college, of course, teaching. I said, do you all think you'll be safer if you come in here and I'm armed? And it was all they could do not to fall out in there. I mean, they all just like, you got to be kidding. I said, well, because they laughed, it's like, Nikki, what do you think we should do? And I, you know, locked the door. We talked about that. Said, well, I have a better solution. I think what we should do is the students should take off when they come to class. They should take off their clothes. Then we'll know who has a gun. The boys just went like, oh my God. I said, then we'll know who has a gun and who doesn't. You know, you just strip down, you know, your bra and your underpants, you know. So the only reason we don't look at naked people, and it's true, is that men don't want people looking at their penis, but we either look at or have felt a penis. Everybody has looked at or felt a penis. So it's time that men got over that and that we went for it. And the men in the class just went, oh, you're kidding. I said, no, you all look at us, right? The penis is just an overgrown, you know, vagina. So, you know, we need to we need to go for it. But that would also let you be very safe in the classroom, because you would know, oh, nobody here has a weapon because none of us and they're like, oh God. I said, I just gave you a movie. I just gave you all speaking. I just gave you a novel. Don't you know, and I know nobody's going to give me 10%, but I just gave it to you, so don't hand me any crap. So there we are with that. Yeah, that's the truth.
How important is using art, using the arts in order to push the culture forward and get the country where we want it to be?
Art is important to any culture, because what we know about any culture, basically, is art. We have followed some of the decisions that the Army has made, that the Army came over, that the Army did this. But what tells the story is the art. And being, of course, Black Americans, what has told our story, because we were artificially denied the right to write and to read, and to put it that way, what told our stories was the music. And it's now not just that we, in 1700s, 1600s, that we sang a song, we created a song, but now the world sings our songs. So you can go any place. You can go to China. You can go to Korea. I don't care where you go. You're going to hear hip hop. You can go all over Africa. You can go all over Europe. You're going to hear our song. So we found a way to tell our story. And as we go into whatever the future is going to be, and I think that the future is very skeptical right now. It's, if I were a dinosaur and I had a baby and I'm looking at Earth, I would say, honey, I think we're in trouble here. I'm not sure how long dinosaurs are going to be around. I'm sure my baby would say, oh, mommy, we're going to be all right. Not so sure. And right now, I'm not so sure how long humans are going to be all right. We've got a weather situation. We've got a fool in the White House. We've got stupid wars going on. We've got several things that say it's a good chance that, probably in the next 100 years, there won't be a human being. There'll be some other life form. And we're looking at the life forms in Antarctica, which I loved going to Antarctica. It's fabulous. And I've been wanting to go into space, but I have no way to go into space. Dr. Bolden said, "Oh, Nikki, I can send you," because I'm like, Dr. Bolden, you got to send me into space. She said, "I can take you into space, but I can't bring you back because I have had cancer, and I had a lung cancer. I had my left lung to be removed, and I had my right breast. I had a mastectomy. So bringing me back would cause my organs to move, and that would kill me." And I'm saying, "Charles, I've got a picture." I said, "Charles, I'm going to die one day anyway. I'm not indifferent to my life, but I think it'd be incredible to spend some time in space. We know now that we can grow vegetables in space. So we know that there is water in space. And of course, the scientists don't want to call it water. They want to call it, well, we're doing it on air, we're doing it something else, but air is water because water is life." Just think about it. And I'm just a poet, but I know that. And I know if we look at Antarctica, we're looking now, and it's incredible, I can't even get small enough. It's a teeny, teeny, tiny, wormy looking thing. And it's the most vicious predator in our community. It can eat any damn thing. And so everybody should be worried about the change in the weather because as this thing grows, and it will, it's going to become something else. It's going to take us over. It's bad enough that we deal with, not bad enough, we've had enough of a fight dealing with viruses. Now, we can fight bacteria. We know that. We know how to deal with bacteria. Brush your teeth, wash your hands, things like that. Viruses are difficult, and we know that just following things like smallpox, following things like AIDS, any number of things that we've had with polio. I've got a picture of me out there. We fight polio. We can fight a virus, and we can fight, a bacteria. But we're in trouble, and a lot of that. I think it's going to. I think that it's a good chance. I like human beings, so I'm on our side. But I think it's a good chance, and the scientists would say, "Nikki, you're being a little early on it." I'm saying next 100 years, that would be 5 generations. Human beings are just not. We're just not going to be here. We have not done anything to deserve life, and that being the case, I just wrote I grew up in a Christian community, and Easter was just recently, and so there's a big deal about and there are people that say no, Jesus didn't rise, or they go through that whole thing. And I wrote a poem that said, "Oh yeah, Jesus rose when we crucified him, and we put him in the tomb." And he's looked around, he rested because he was tired. It wouldn't be somebody trying to kill you. And then he thought, "Oh, Dad, it's time for me to leave." So Jesus went to Mars because he said, "These people don't appreciate me and they don't know what's going on. Is it okay if I leave?" And so now human beings are still fighting about where is Jesus? Did he rise or whatever? I think Jesus on Mars. He's sitting there saying, "I told you, Dad." I told you these people are crazy. And so I don't know what we're going to find as we begin to stay on Mars. But I remember Mars was the red planet, and we know that there were probably wars on Mars. So we have to see, it's just, you have to rethink all of this stuff. But if I was looking for Jesus, I definitely would look on Mars because he's tired. Maybe Saturn. I'm not sure about that because Saturn is way out too. But that he didn't stay here because it's like these people are not. We did not earn him,
Right.
and so he's gone. God has left us, and so it's been really interesting if we, as a life form, begin to say, what have we done to deserve life on Earth, and how do we keep things alive? Because right now, just look at the number of trees that fell this last storm. I don't know about over here. Over here, trees,
It's a lot there too.
A lot. Well, if you're losing trees, what goes next? If you can't keep the trees, then you can't keep the soil. And look at California. So the mudslides are coming because they don't have the trees.
Right.
Yeah. So, I'm not against any of these things. I'm just saying, in 100 years, 2118, I know by 2218 we're gone.
They said the fires and the mudslides are connected. You don't have the trees because of the fires. And
We stand a good chance of being gone. But then that'll go back to, if you're religious, that goes back to, but y'all shouldn't have crucified him. Told y'all, leave him alone. There was a woman, if you remember, there was a woman in the crowd. It said, leave him. This is an innocent man. But you also have to remember, and I said that to a group, and I knew I was talking to a group of ignorant people, not who just didn't know. And I said, you have to remember that the only person that helped Jesus was a Cyrenian, Saint Simon, the Cyrenian, right? And I think that everybody has been angry that Cyrenians took up the responsibility. And so as we are now in 2018 bombing Syria, we're still upset because we didn't do the right thing. And so I had an audience that looked and they were, what did she just say? And I'm saying, you have to, I'm sorry, guys, you have to read your Bible. This is not about what you believe. It isn't about what your religion, none about that. It's about when Jesus held the cross. And there's an agreement on that. There's an agreement with everybody on that. When Jesus was going to be crucified on Calvary, the cross was heavy. And the only person that stepped up to say, let me help you carry the cross, was Simon the Cyrenian. And the only people that we're still angry about, that we're jealous with, that we realize we have done the wrong thing, that we needed to have said to those people, you did the right thing, but was the Cyrenians. You can't get away from that one.
That's black and white. It's just...
And so it's just going to be interesting. I mean, that's and some things you just have to recognize. I think that Africa owes Black Americans an apology, because I know that the Europeans didn't start slavery; they became a part of it, and Africa has to take responsibility for the fact that there was a slave trade going on, that the Europeans, right now, we who are Black Americans are not going to say, "Oh my goodness." Because whatever it is, it took us to another space. It took us to the future. It's good because look at what we did. We created that song that the world sings. So got no problem with that. But it would be healthy for West Africa particularly to say, well, golly, we shouldn't have been involved in this slave trade. But having done so 300 years ago, we are going to apologize for it. We're going to say that we're sorry. We're not going to pretend that it didn't happen. And this is, to me, what human life form is doing. We keep trying to act like that which happened didn't happen. It's like those fools that say, oh no, there's no Holocaust, or no, we didn't really lynch you all. Of course you did. Not each and every, but those of you who did are going to have to take responsibility. Somebody's got to take responsibility for Trump. And if they don't do something about him, it's going to be a sad thing for America. And it is, but we who are Black have gone through things like this. So going through Trump, we can do that. But I don't think that human beings as a group are going to continue, because we just aren't worthy of life right now. That's just me.
And you've been doing some work with NASA?
Oh yeah, because one, I've always been a space freak, and having Dr. Bolden, he asked, not he did, but his people asked a favor, and my answer to every favor is yes. And so we did that, and then I got to know him, and he came here and spoke to the English students, and all of my science kids here. Everybody was upset. They said, you had Dr. Bolden here. And I said, yeah. Well, we could have had 500 people at least, who wanted to hear him. And I said, yeah, and it's good. I said, I know that. But I wanted the English kids to recognize that their imagination is what's important. Right now, NASA doesn't want to put any money, and it's not Dr. Bowling, because they're going to put a new, as I said to somebody else, once Donald Trump realized that Bowling was black, he's going to get rid of him because he's a racist. Dr. Bowling, that fool, Trump is. But what I had wanted, what we all would want Trump to do, of course, is send, maybe 10 to 12 writers into Antarctica and keep them there for a couple of weeks, give them a tent alone so that they can feel, what is it like to be alone in space? What am I dreaming? What does my imagination do? And we're looking now at something that, as I said to Dr. Bowden, he's looking at like, Nick, come on now, it's less than $100,000. We're not looking at a lot of money. We really aren't. But we're living in a country that fools like Trump want to pretend that they're billionaires. So we're not going to get the money that we need to send some kids that are here as English majors, who we need to be able to say, go on down, and sit in the cold for a couple of weeks. We're talking about that worm. Now we don't want them to run into the worm, because the worm will, if the worm can get inside, the worm will kill them. But also, if the worm gets inside, when they come back home, and we're now looking at, this kid is not doing well, we begin to examine it, and now we've got that worm. Maybe we'll be able to not talk to, I was going to say talk to, but it's not going to speak English, I don't mean, but maybe we'll be able to figure out, okay, how do we meet the worm, and how do we work with it? And what does our imagination, how did it evolve? And what does our imagination have to do with how we solve it? How do we not destroy it, but to live with it? And human beings have yet to deal with the fact, somebody said that to me, oh, you're fighting cancer. I said, oh, no, I would never fight cancer, because if I'm fighting cancer, I'm going to lose. What I want to do is I want to learn how to live with cancer. That's what I want. I'm not going to beat it. I want to learn how to live with it. And we need to do that on any number of other viruses and bacteria. Not how do we destroy them, because if we think we can destroy them, we're wrong. What we want to do is to learn how do we live with them. And that's what the poets are supposed to be able to tell us. I'm just,
And take you back just a little bit. Saw an interview that you did in '71 with Muhammad Ali on a talk show called More About Soul.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you how that show came about, but also I noticed briefly as the camera pans, in the audience is Esther Roll. And I was always curious, did you know she was there, or was that just by coincidence, man?
I didn't, and that was good. I met Ali because a wonderful woman named Victoria Lucas, worked for a man, and I can't bring his name up, who handled Ali's publicity. And Vicky worked with him. And so when Ali was stripped of his belt, he said to Vicky, what should we do? And she said, oh, let him, because, he's always mouthing off, let him go read. She said, well, who would read with Ali? She said, oh, I know Nikki, let me call. And so she called. You'd be surprised at the people she called and said no. You would be surprised, and that's something you can look up. And she called me and she said, Ali is he's being stripped, and we're thinking about putting him maybe on a tour. What would you think about making him a part of your tour? Because I was popular, and I can't think of anything that would make me happier than to have Muhammad Ali be a part of my tour. I think it'd be great, because my tour was set up. I said I would be honored. And so ended up happening is that introduced me. Can you imagine? And so he would come out and he would do, because the kids were just getting to know Ali. And then I would come on and I would do what I did. And of course we laughed because he was always on the bus. Speaking of buses, he was on the bus. He had his own bus and he had his own wife. And his wife liked me because she thought, and she was absolutely right, that I was not meddling with him. But she didn't know that I wasn't on the bus. She always thought I was on the bus, and so she always thought, well, Ali is behaving himself, as it were. But I didn't have time to be on the bus, and I had a son at that point, and of course he's grown now. But Thomas, his name was Tom. Thomas and I would be flying where I was going, and I had a nanny, and her name was Debbie. And a lot of the times, like by the time you're going to St. Louis and Texas, and once you're going west like that, I would have Debbie and Thomas with me. So we would be flying, right? And Ali is on the bus. And so I never told her. She would say, "How was the ride?" And I'd say, "Oh, the ride was," because I never told her I'm not on the bus, and I don't know, because Ali. I don't know if you know the term. My students didn't. Ali was a cock hound, and a lot of people didn't know what I said that to my students. What's a cock hound? I don't even know how to explain that to you. But there was always some woman on the bus with Ali. His wife thought it was me, and she could trust me. If it had been me, she certainly could have, but it wasn't me. So I had to laugh. And Ali, we never did. We laughed. He and I used to. It was none of my business. That was his marriage. That was his business. It was his business. I hoped that I was working on a book with her, and other things ended up interfering with it. But I have it, and it's in my papers. But my papers are locked until I am deceased, until I pass, because I don't want my papers out. The answer to that is no. I just don't want my papers out. And so I have all of this conversation with Nina, and I really enjoyed talking with Nina. One, because she's a wonderful, wonderful woman. She's incredibly talented, and I think that maybe more than most, Nina was lonely, because I think talent brings you a certain loneliness, and I think you have to learn to accept that. And I think to a great degree, if I may, and I'm not judging Nina at all, because I love Nina, but I think that being Nina Simone, she didn't take that step to say, I have talent, and now I have to, this is how I deal with, this is how I go on. And I think a lot of the singers, I think the writers do better with our talent, if I may, than the singers do, because they're always on stage and they're always singing essentially the same songs. And I think that somehow that can become a burden. I really do. And so losing Nina was hard. Yeah, that I wish she had stayed. Again, we're back to in the United States. I'm not in a position to give anybody, but see, she knew Jimmy Baldwin and them, and she knew Chester Himes and them, as did I. But they, Jimmy went to St. Paul de Vence. They were in France. Langston is, all over the world in Russia and stuff, and I think that group of people left the United States. We didn't. And I think it was important that we didn't, but I also think it was important that we just said, oh, no, this is home, and I'm good. I'm going to, plant my garden, and, I'm going to see what happens. And I think that it probably helped keep us, I don't want to say sane, but it helped us to look at life in a different way. And I was looking the other day, I was thinking about, again, talking to my students, because we talk about everything. And I was just talking about, because it was the death of Michael Jackson. And it was somewhere along, And so we were talking about it, and I was saying, I wonder, and I still do, if Michael had gone to, for example, college, it would have been, I think, incredibly helpful if he had gone to Fisk, because Fisk has the Jubilee Singers. So he would have had a background in singing that's going to be different from what made him so popular, but it's going to open another door, because what he ended up doing was trying to be better. He was trying to make history, which wasn't that good, better than, you know, Rockaway or whatever it was. That he kept trying to beat himself. If he had just gone to, in my opinion, gone to college. And you could say, well, if he'd gone to college, everybody would have been excited. But the advantage of being a Negro, in all fairness, and I use that term advisedly, is that once you're a Negro, you go like, okay, Michael Jackson's in my class. And then a week later, somebody says, is Michael Jackson in your class? Oh, yeah, I think so. And then a week later, you don't remember. Because black people just give things up. It's like, yeah, I think that's Michael Jackson. They leave it alone. And it would have given him a home and another way of looking at his music. What would have happened if Michael Jackson had learned to sing and love spirituals? Because he didn't. But what would have happened if we had been able to send Michael to Fisk and he had looked at, oh, this is the history. You talk about history. This is the history. These are the people that brought us over. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to do something else now. Would have saved his life, I think. So you're going to have to create what you're looking for. You're going to have to find a way. And that's what college does a lot of things for you. You learn stuff, but it also gives you a community. So, and I say Fisk because I went to Fisk, but you're there in Nashville. So there's going to be a little church because there are a whole bunch of, and you're going to go. And the first time you go, in fact, the first time you go to a little church, everybody's going, and next Sunday, everybody's, yeah, that's Michael. And third Sunday, because that's what you love about Negroes. They get over everything. I love us for that. And it would give, we're back to it, would give him a home. And having a home, you're going to find some people that understand. You say, oh, Mike, why don't you come over and have dinner tonight? We're having catfish. I bet you I never had catfish. I would bet you that. Or we're having pig feet, or whatever. Yeah, come on by, we're having green beans tonight. And pretty soon you have a community. You have somebody my age, some old lady that says, oh, honey, why don't you come on by? I'm doing hot cornbread today. Hot water cornbread, excuse me, because there's a big difference. We're doing hot water cornbread. And he's going to have to say, well, Miss Giovanni, what's hot water cornbread? Oh, come on by, honey, I'll give you some. It gives your whole life another way of looking at it. And we're back to almost your first question to me. How we, as Black Americans, got to where we are. 90% of it was that we said, okay, this is how we go together. And that's what we did. And the only thing that I hate, and I say it all the time, but the only thing that I hate from this whole experience with white Americans, what I hate is KFC, because I know that there's no white man on God's earth that ever fried a chicken. And when I see Kentucky Fried, I know I really do. I would starve to death and go to hell before I would buy Kentucky Fried Chicken. I really would. I just hate looking at that, because we know that they threw the neck and the liver. They threw it at our people. They said, oh, you take this, because they didn't see that, what could you do with it? And of course what we did was he dipped it in a little flour and we fried it. The same thing, and I always laugh because it's so good. I like greens, but the same thing you do with greens, because white people thought the greens were good, and we knew the pot liquor. We got strong on the pot liquor. And so it's what we did together, how we worked that together, that made this community. And those people who stayed and who did the cooking and who did the cleaning, and now, and of course, I say now, but we're now talking about, 10 years ago, the women at G's Bend who took the scraps and made those beautiful quilts. And it took Smithsonian years before they finally said, oh my God, look at what we have here. But they weren't making the G's Bins quilts for the Smithsonian. They were making it to keep their people warm. And being here in Virginia, it always tickles me when you're having hypocrites, there's no other word, that are saying things like, well, I don't think black and white people should be married. They're fighting about that. I don't think that gay people should be married. They're fighting about that. And yet, we're in the state that Thomas Jefferson carried around the world with him, Sally Hemings. So it's not a question of the sex. It's a question of the marriage. We don't want to see somebody saying, this is Loving versus Virginia right here. It's not a question of sex. It's a question of we don't want two people to say we care about each other because the sex has been there forever. The sex has been there since people were old enough to have sex. So what we're fighting about is we don't want the blacks and the whites, we don't want the gay men or the gay women, we don't want them to be able to say, but this is who I love. We want to take that love away. We want to make it something dirty. Speaking of of those things, because you can look around. I mean, you can look at Virginia. You can. White men ran up and down those roads. Sometimes they did it as friends, and sometimes they did it as rapists. We know that Thomas Jefferson did it and had those children, and those were his children, and he never tried to say they weren't. We know that Loving versus Virginia did it because Mr. Loving wanted to marry Mrs. Loving. These are things we know. And so you get tired of the hypocrites who are trying to say something else. You just get tired of it. You think, well, it's time that we moved on. Because somebody's going to marry that little that little worm I told you about. Somebody's going to come home one day and say, Mom, I want you to meet the worm. And the mother's going, I don't want to be bothered with no worm. They better get used to it because that's their son-in-law or mother-in-law or whatever it's going to be. That's who it is. That's who your child loves, and we're going to have to make that. That's going to be a decision that has to be made. And I think they're hypocrite. Of course, Donald Trump is a hypocrite because he's never married an American woman.
Right.
Scared to. But nobody's going to say he's never had sex with a black woman. Or a black man. We know that. These are things we know. I don't know what the Russians have on him, but I would love to see the photograph of him in bed with a black man, because he was. But that would be another discussion. I just thought I'd mention it. I'm glad that they're saving Monticello, but I'm also glad that they are particularly saving the Hemings house.
Yeah.
Because you can see, I mean, that's just one of those, and this is where Tom lived, and this is where Sally and her family lived.
Yeah.
But this is where, when he wanted whatever, and I think it has to be more than sex because it went on too long. There has to be some love. We know that Sally Hemings went with him to Paris. And we know that she was free when she went to Paris. And we know that she knew that she was free. And she said to Tom, I can stay here and be essentially rid of you. I'm sure she didn't put it that way. Or I can ask you to free our children. Your decision. And of course, he did the right thing because, again, somebody like me, I'm just a poet, but I'm going to think he loved her. And he did not want to lose her. So he said, I'll free the children. If you'll come back and stay with me, I'll free the children. It's fabulous. It's a fabulous story.
Are you able to choose a favorite piece of work?
No, I really, my favorite piece of work is always the latest piece that I've been working on, and that's just, I think, probably anybody. I really like what I'm doing lately, just because I'm learning so much more. Um, I'm not I'm not religious like that, but I'm rethinking. I have to rethink Jesus, and I love space, and so I've been putting them together. Somebody's gonna put me in a hospital. No, I mean, this bitch is crazy. She got Jesus on Mars. But I keep trying to think, what have we learned? Because we're not dealing with what we've learned. Jesus has been around a long time, so we've learned something. There's a story that's being told, and so I think my job as a poet is to think, okay, what have we learned? What I have to rethink, and so that's what I'm trying to do, and it's interesting to me. But you say my favorite, on any given day, any given point. That's the truth.
And I've heard that you cook.
I'm a good cook.
Yeah. What would you say is your favorite thing to cook?
That's too easy.
Yeah.
My favorite is, of course, a rack of lamb, and of course, today, if I were trying to cook a rack of lamb, I'd have to put it in the oven because you can't. But I love it when we get spring, we get summer, and it's warm outside, and I can cook it on. I can do it in the I can cook it outside. I can grill it.
Oh.
Fantastic. If I do say so myself. Yeah, indeed. I just got a note from, we have a group of people that have been meeting for the last 30 years. They're the Wintergreen women. And we started to put them together because when I was invited here, I was speaking at James Madison, JMU, and Joanne Gavin was there, and I was saying, she said, "Oh, what are your plans?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be coming to Virginia Tech, because I had no idea what the relationship." She said, "Well, that's right down the street." That's great. Then I knew. She said, "Who do you know?" I said, "I don't know anybody." But she knows everybody, and she said, "Why don't I pull together some people so that you can meet them?" I said, "That'd be wonderful." And so she pulled us together, wrote some people that she knew, and said, "Let's go to Wintergreen." And so about 12 of us went up, and we really had a lovely time. We gossiped, and it was just wonderful. And we just kind of looked at each other that Sunday, because we went up on Thursday and Friday, and we said, "Well, why don't we come next year?" So we've been doing it for 30
Oh, that's
for
amazing.
30 years. And I just got a note from Joanne because she likes, I cook, these are called lollipop lamb chops. They're
Okay.
like 2 bites.
Mm-hmm.
And because it is wonderful up there, I grill them.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, it's wonderful. And so I said to her, I've gotten my lollipops, because there'll be 14 of us. So I got 3 dozen because I know the women. And I said, "Is there anything else?" She said, "Oh yeah, tell Jenny I want the red potatoes, because Jenny makes incredible red potatoes." And I just got that. I'm surprised the phone didn't. I just got that note.
Oh, okay.
And then they'll do the rest. They'll do the dessert. They'll do, and so everybody brings something to cook. Trudier is going to bring breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't they, we all do something. So that's what we do.
Okay.
And I just think things like that are nice.
Yeah.
It's a chance to get together and say hello. Trudier won an important teachers award, so you won't be out before we are, but we're surprising her. We're giving her flowers and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we're so proud of her.
What about jazz music in particular intrigues you? Why that genre?
See, my mother's a jazz fan, and I'm just very, very fortunate to have grown up. My grandmother grew up in the church. She's a Baptist, so I grew up hearing spirituals and gospel music. But mommy, for reasons I couldn't begin to tell you, but mommy was a jazz fan. And so if you just go boom, 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 you're going to put that together. And that's what I heard. And of course, I grew up with rhythm and blues. And I like rhythm and blues. I grew up in Lincoln Heights, Ohio, which is right outside of Cincinnati. And of course, our most famous people from Lincoln Heights are the Isley Brothers. And speaking of Michael Jackson, everything that Michael knew about rhythm and blues, he learned it from Ronald Isley. And so we're very proud of, we're very proud of that. But I like jazz because my mother liked jazz, and that's what I listened to. And I used to, which was very fortunate, I used to be lucky enough to have breakfast with Dizzy. And yeah, because he'd be coming in as I'm going out, as we traveled, And then I was so happy, and I know that that was probably a part of it, to see, Stevie Wonder did, I'm very proud to bring Dizzy Gillespie, below. So if we got Dizzy on Stevie Wonder's record, So, and I think a lot of people haven't taken up what Stevie took up, because Stevie, it was more than just a R&B. He did that, and he had, great records. He had number one records, but to have Dizzy Gillespie, to ask Diz to be a part of it. So we knew people like that. I didn't know Mr. Coltrane because I knew the music, but I knew John. I knew Miles Davis because he was right there in New York, So I knew some of the living people. And when I wrote my third book, it was called Black Judgment. I thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a book party at Birdland, because my mother's a jazz fan. And of course, Birdland, as you may or may not know, is run by criminals. And so Monday, because they were closed on Monday, they were closed on Sunday, Monday. And so one Monday I went down, I just walked downstairs and met Mr. Logan. How are you, Mr. Logan? Harold Logan was, I'm Nikki Giovanni, I'm a poet. It's one of those kind of things. And he's looking at me like, what? And I said, I was wondering what I had to do to have a book party in Birdland. And, you could just see him go, did she just say what? And we talked and talked and talked. And he finally said, well, it'd be, $500, something like. And I said, oh, Mr. Logan, I don't have any money. I wondered what else we could do. And he said, okay. And we talked. He said, well, bring me 100 people and you have the club. 99 people and you owe me $500. I said, that sounds like good. We shook hands on it, Mr. Logan shared that, by the way, with Lloyd Price, as you may or may not know. Lloyd Price and Harold Logan owned Birdland. And so I shook hands on that and went upstairs, and then I thought, my God, I just shook hands with the man who kills people. And so I literally worked my behind off. But my next door neighbor was Morgan Freeman. I had, before he was that, but it was Morgan. I had a lot of, so the people that I knew, and I asked them, would they come and read? Barbara Ann Tier, would they come and read? And they all said yes. So I just worked on the radio just to say that. So that Sunday, because they're closed on Sunday, that Sunday, people started coming at about, 3:30, 4 o'clock. People started coming. People started coming. Well, up above, Birdland is down. It was in the basement. And up above Birdland, of course, on the other side of the street, 42nd, was, at that point, was New York Times. And what they saw was these people. And then they saw the line turn. So they saw these people, and they sent a reporter down to say, what's going on? And, of course, the answer was, Black Judgment is coming. So you see where that went. And so the reporter's like, oh, my God, and it was black and white. There was a lot of people. And they said, well, who's doing it? They said, Nikki Giovanni. So he said, I'm looking for Nick Giovanni. He finally got to me and said, I'm looking for Nick Giovanni. I said, well, I'm Nikki Giovanni. No, I'm looking for Nick Giovanni. Do you know where he is? And I said, no, I don't. I just gone on my bed. So he finally had to come back. You're Nikki Giovanni? I said, yeah. He said, well, I was looking for you. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm having a book party. And we're having a jazz club, So what happened, the New York Times has, it's the second news page here at the Roanoke Times, it's called Extra. But whatever it is, it's the second. And so I got the second news page. And so that's going to help open a door for my career, Oh, yeah. And Mr. Logan and I became friends. Unfortunately, he was murdered. And I was I was very sorry because I knew who murdered him. Eddie murdered him. And Eddie worked with another gang. And, you talk about, the Godfather making you an offer you can't refuse. But I was really sorry Mr. Logan was murdered because even though you say, well, they're crooks or whatever it is that we think they are, we have to work with everybody. And I was sorry we lost Mr. Logan. Mr. Lloyd Price, Mr. Price and I stayed. We're not friends, but we stayed together. So I had a concert at Lincoln Center, and I invited Mr. Price because I knew he was close to Aretha. That's not why, but that was one of the reasons. I said to Mr. Price, you think you can bring Aretha? And he said, I can ask, but we were pretty sure Aretha only works for cash. So I don't have any money. I didn't. Everything that I do, I can give you one of those. I had Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou here. Everything I do is free because once money comes in, it's a problem. And the best thing to do is leave money out. Well, Miss Franklin works for cash, and so we weren't going to get her. But I said, Lord, are you going to, am I losing you also? And he said, no, I'll be there. And so he did. He opened the show for us. But he opened the show with, I wish Aretha Franklin could be here. And I think Aretha didn't speak to me for 2 years because she thought I had put him up to it, which I hadn't. I really, really hadn't. But, Aretha had her reasons to do what she does. And I do a lot of things just, you have to say, you have to say yes. And you get to know people, and you may not get to be, you may not get to be all that close. In my opinion, Aretha's incredibly special. And so I'm not complaining about that. It's just, you have to find a way to deal with people and to not be used, but to deal with the community. And I'm sure somebody like Aretha probably every day had someone wanting her to do something. And so I was just sorry. I was working with the gospel choir, New York Community Choir, and so I was just sorry that she couldn't be with us. But then the next year, she and Atlantic, she made her gospel record. They went out to California with James Cleveland. Mm-hmm. See, I was with New York Community, and of course she's Aretha Franklin, so she gets James Cleveland. And I thought they did a good job. And she, of course, sang, whereas I'm going to do poetry. Mm-hmm. So we're doing different things. And if you look at that, then you're looking at the beginning of hip hop and how hip hop came along, because we talked it through, And so people looking at, if you can do poetry with gospel music, then you can create, And the doors that they open to hip hop, because all the hip hop people are rich and the poets are sitting around, we're not starving, but we have to pay our checks. We have to write a check every month. So
is Tupac your favorite hip hop artist?
He's the one that I absolutely know best. Mm-hmm. And I just agreed, and I'm excited about it, to do a book on Tupac. My editor had called me, and we were talking back and forth. And I don't want to do a biography. I don't want to do, he was born on June 7th. I don't want to do that. But I do want to do something like what I did with Rosa Parks, to kind of just show his importance like that. And so I'm hoping that I can make it what I want it to be, so that because the kids who are coming up now don't really know Tupac.
Right.
And so I want to give them an insight into who he is when my heart stops beating. See, this is a guy who stood for something. I'm not saying that some of the other hip-hop people don't, but Tupac stood for something. And I think that somebody like me needs to do it. And so Rachel is my editor, and Rachel and I are working it out. We're going to work it out to a book that your 5-year-old can read, so that he can say, "Oh, Pac is important."
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. Because he is, and we want him known. Mm-hmm. We want your son to be able to know who Pac is.
You You were friends with Mrs. Parks?
No, with Mrs. I thought you were going to say Alfana.
Oh.
Yeah, I did. I was so fortunate to know Mrs. Parks, and of course I tell the joke about Mrs. Parks because meeting her was a whole nother long story. But talking to somebody like Mrs. Parks, there's no point in discussing the history. And one day we're sitting there, and she's drinking her tea, and I'm drinking my coffee. And I said, Miss Parks, it's amazing when I think about your life that you only made one mistake. And her face dropped. And and what was that, baby? I said, you joined AKA, which I'm a Delta. And I tell that when I go to colleges, and all of because the Deltas are going like, yeah, I mean, but she is, AKAs have a lot of great women, of course, but it's not, but I get to laugh about that. But yes, I did get to know Mrs. Parks, and again, I'm very lucky, and I got to know, and I'm a distant relative of Lena Horne, and so I was very, very glad to see that they did the stamp on Lena. I was glad about that, and of course, I knew and love, and all of these are women that I love, but I definitely loved Dorothy Height, and we were someplace. I really don't remember where now, and I said, "Oh, look, that's Dottie Height," and the kids around me were like, "Who is Dottie Height?" And one of the girls said, "No, that's Dorothy Height." And I said, "Yeah, Dottie," and because we called her Dottie, and I was so glad to do that. But Dottie had, she ran the National Council, and there was a mess going on with the National Council, and Dottie wanted to know who was speaking because she was worried. It was a thing to do with the Cincinnati Reds and the owner of the Reds, and she said, "Well, who's speaking?" Because she was concerned that somebody would suck up to Mark. The owner of the Reds was Mark Schott, and she said, "Well, who's speaking?" And her people said, "Oh, Nikki Giovanni speaking." She said, "Oh, now I can go to bed. I don't have to worry about it." When I heard that, and that's still one of the things that makes me so proud of myself, of that Dottie Height knew I was not going to let her down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, that brings tears to my eyes, but that was important, that those women know I'm not going to let them down.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, that's all you can do.
Right? I believe you've chosen to use the term Black Americans instead of African Americans, correct?
Mhm.
You could explain that to me, why you've chosen it.
Well, we are Americans, and for whatever America is, it cannot exist without black people. And I laugh about it because I say it all the time. But we are the only people in truth that were brought to America. Everybody else came to America. And the founding fathers are looking around and saying, oh, wait a minute, now where are the black people? Because you can't have a nation without us. And when we look at what is called African American, now we're looking at a continent. There's no such thing as European Americans. There's no such thing as European language. They all have their own language, but somehow we're supposed to have, but we're supposed to have African language. Well, there is no such thing. But as we came to America, which we were brought to, the language had to be developed so that the white people who brought us here could talk to us, and so that we, as the black people who were brought here and sold here, but we had to learn that language so that we could understand what they were saying. So there would be no American language without the the black people being a part of it. It's impossible without them. And we know that there were people that didn't like the fact that black Americans actually, we had the drums, so we tried to learn, and we did, how to talk to each other because drums were pretty common in West Africa particularly. We could talk with drums. And so we know that white Americans didn't like the idea that there was a drum being said that they didn't understand. They didn't like the fact that there was a tap being done that they didn't understand, or a snap. But we had to lose the drum because we lost it. But we kept the snap and the tap. But I use, and to me it's important, we are black Americans because they are white Americans. And somehow or another, they don't want to be whoever they is. They don't want to be white. They want to be Americans. And they want to make us different. There is no America without black Americans. And those two things are incredibly important. They brought us here, and the language that they had to learn and that we had to learn in order to taught each other was through the fact that blacks and whites had to speak to America, had to speak to each other. And I think it's incredibly important. You can't make a continent out of us, because that doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't. People got mad, the Marcus Garveys of this world, and they had reason. They're coming from, we have the people coming from the Caribbean, because we had people in the island and stuff. But you think about an entire continent, and somehow or another we're supposed to be responsible for an entire continent. I don't think so. I think we're responsible for this country and what we had made of this country, because this country is impossible without us. And we didn't ask to come. They came to get us. And you can say, oh, well, Nikki, they needed somebody to work. But we had Indians, what was called Indians, and they weren't Indians, by the way, as we all know. Columbus was lost. He thought he was in India, and that's why he called these people Indians. The Native Americans, he called Indians. They all had their own name. But you didn't have to go get slaves. You didn't have to go buy slaves, because all you had to do was whip them, whip them, whip them. Somebody would learn to work. I mean no disrespect, but and we know that poor whites and criminal whites were sent over by blacks, by the British and the Scottish and the Irish, who didn't want to be bothered with them. So if we had just wanted workers, we could have called, we could have said, we want the criminals, as we did in forming Australia. Didn't we? We just sent the criminals down to Australia, said, y'all work it out. We could have done that. So there had to be another, and now we're back to, I'm always thinking, there had to be another reason that we needed black people. And I can only think that the only reason we needed black people is that we knew we couldn't have a country without us.